What if many of today's biggest health problems trace back to one overlooked system in the body? Today, we break down insulin resistance with guidance from award-winning endocrinologist and leader in metabolic health. Today's guest is Dr. Zachary Bloomgarden, a clinical professor at Mount Sinai, editor of the Journal of Diabetes, and the author of hundreds of scientific publications in metabolic health. Dr. Bloomgarden's work is grounded in one clear mission: helping patients achieve the best overall health using every available tool. In this episode, you're going to learn 3 different things. First, why insulin resistance sits at the center of conditions like diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and even cancer. Secondly, how everyday habits like nutrition, movement, strength training, and stress reduction directly shape that system. And third, how certain medications like GLP-1s can fit into that care, not as shortcuts, but as tools when medically deemed necessary to help improve the lives of everybody. This conversation is about building long-term health in order to provide people with the best chance to live a long and fruitful life. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Health Movement Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Health Movement Podcast. I have an awesome guest with us today, but before I introduce him, I just want to reiterate that I personally am not a doctor. My guest happens to be, but before you change any programming or diets or anything like that, please consult with your physician. But without any further ado, with us today, we have Dr. Zachary Bloomgarden, an endocrinologist specializing in diabetes and obesity, clinical professor at Mount Sinai, and the editor of the Journal of Diabetes. He's authored hundreds of scientific publications and has spent decades studying what actually moves the needle on metabolic health. So, Dr. Bloomgarden, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. And call me Zach.
Zach, okay. I will call you Zach. So how did I do with the intro, Zach? Did I miss anything? Anything that was glaring that I should have put in there?
Not at all.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Can you just, to let the listeners get to know you a little better, what got you started in the field of medicine? How was this always a passion of yours?
So I actually started in math and computers way back in the day, as it were. And I had started with a Commodore 64, which probably amazingly dates me, but it was a wonderful gadget. And then I moved on from that. So I love math still, but I decided that I wasn't really smart enough to be a mathematician.
Okay.
And it's a certain type of knowledge.
Yes.
And I've been interested in medicine, and, there are a lot of wonderful heroes in medicine, going back forever.
Do you have any specific ones that kind of motivated you or put you on the path you're on now?
Well, before I actually knew anything about medicine, there were stories of Maimonides, the Jewish philosopher who was a physician. There's Florence Nightingale, who wasn't a medical doctor, but was an amazing human being who really revolutionized care and, all kinds of. There was a wonderful Canadian doctor named Norman Bethune, who, as a young man, I was sort of on the left, and I've moved to the right, I guess, as people do with age. So Norman Bethune was a Canadian who joined Mao on the Long March and is really considered a hero in China. And he was a surgeon, and I just thought, wow, what a wonderful person. And then when I became a doctor, I read so many doctors who have given so much of themselves to help people. It's a wonderful, fulfilling career to actually be able to help people. And I love it that I'm able to do that.
That's wonderful. So how long were you in math and in computers before making the switch? to medicine?
I still love computers. So I don't think I've abandoned things. And
No, I meant career-wise. When did you decide to make that switch?
so I finished college, and in college started to take pre-med courses and then applied to medical school and said, this is not for me. I'm not going to be able to really be brilliant in math. So I knew.
No, knew early on then. I graduated with a computer science degree, and I've been teaching elementary school for the last 23, 24 years. So I still have a love of technology and computers, but
Yeah.
again, that wasn't my path either. So I understand the switch. So you focus more on obesity and the connection to diabetes. Is that correct?
Well, it's really all one linked set of metabolic conditions. So diabetes is not the same as obesity, but what underlies most diabetes of people in Western cultures and really all over the world is something we call insulin resistance. So insulin is the hormone that is kind of involved in moving glucose, our main body fuel, into cells, but it's really much more than that. It's a hormone that's involved in protein synthesis, in utilizing fat, storing fat. And it's kind of interesting that insulin sits by itself almost in its role, whereas there are so many counter insulin hormones that are present in the body. And of course, we label hormones as being one thing or another. And then as we learn more, we realize that they have many, many more roles. But there's insulin lowering blood sugar, and then there is glucagon raising blood sugar, cortisol raising blood sugar, uh, adrenaline, epinephrine, raising blood sugar, and a host of other what have been termed counter-regulatory hormones. And so why is insulin so crucial in the equation? And why do some people have insulin resistance? And that's the key to understanding what we call type 2 diabetes. So there's a completely different, not completely different, but a different illness called type 1 diabetes, which is really an autoimmune disease where the cells that produce insulin are attacked by the immune system and stop working. So it's not utterly different. Both of them have high blood sugar, but to explain the relationship to obesity, you have to say insulin resistance, which is the key feature of type 2 diabetes, is also caused by the factors that underlie not just diabetes, but obesity. Obesity causes the body not to respond in the same way to insulin. Lack of physical activity. And I saw that you're interested in exercise, and I'm definitely an exercise person.
Good.
That's part of it. Um, all sorts of stresses are associated with insulin resistance. And then insulin resistance not only causes high blood sugar, but also causes inflammation throughout the body, causes liver disease, causes kidney disease, causes heart disease, heart failure, atherosclerosis, hardening the arteries. So in essence, the factors that underlie diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and that are potentiated by obesity and physical inactivity are then the causes of many of the illnesses that afflict human beings. Cancer is in not all cases, but many forms of cancer are brought about by insulin resistance. So how could that possibly happen? A kind of simpler way of putting it is that insulin has two different sets of actions. One, to move sugar into cells. But number two, it's involved in protein synthesis and in cell growth. So if you rev up the cell growth set of circumstances by insulin, because the body is not responding properly to insulin in terms of blood sugar lowering. So there's a very intricate feedback system. And when that goes awry, the body says, oh, let me make more insulin. I need to get the blood sugar down. And so you start to have a revved up, what's called a mitogenic set of responses to insulin, a kind of different pathways, which then lead to scar tissue, essentially, fibrosis, which can affect the heart, the liver, the kidneys, many organs. That is part of what underlies the association of obesity and diabetes with certain forms of cancer. And it sort of sets in motion this set of illnesses that are not completely addressable by healthy diet and healthy exercise, because some people just develop medical problems, but which can be so much changed and benefited by all the healthy lifestyle factors that I try to live with and I try to help my patients to follow as well.
Uh, wow, there's a lot to unpack there, Zach. That is so. From my understanding, and as I said, I'm an elementary school teacher, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But I've had guests on that have talked about insulin resistance and the importance of eating clean, not 100% of the time, but a good portion of the time. Get rid of highly processed foods, fruits, vegetables, lean meat, whatever it happens to be, but not a box of Pop-Tarts every morning. That's certainly not going to help. But this insulin resistance seems like it's the beginning of a lot of other symptoms that follow. Is that an accurate statement that we can, and not always, I understand there are different circumstances, but is it one of the major factors that will lead to heart disease, liver disease, all these other ramped up inflammation, like you said, scar tissue?
Absolutely. So one of my heroes sort of started his work around the time that I was starting medical school, a man named Gerald Reefin, who took a look at all these things and took a look at high insulin, high blood fat levels, high sugar levels, and figured out essentially that all of these go together, and in many ways coined the term insulin resistance syndrome. And I've been kind of studying that and trying to help people with it, but also writing about it for most of my professional life.
That's amazing. Um, so that seems to be one of the root causes of a lot of our, I'll say, unhealthy lifestyle. And it seems like over the, I'm not trying to date you or anything like that, but how long have you been in the medical field now?
So I started medical school in 1970, I guess, and
Okay.
finished in 74. So quite a
So
while.
you've seen kind of the I don't know if evolution is the right term, but the shift in our overall health as a country over the last 50 or so years. Is a lot of it related to insulin resistance based on the food that we eat, and we're not as mobile as we once were? We have a more sedentary lifestyle, a lot more jobs are behind a computer as opposed to something where you're constantly moving around. Is that kind of the cause of a lot of this?
Well, it's probably much more complicated, but yes.
Yes, yes, there are a lot of things that go into it, I
Right.
understand, but
So if you take a look and say, what could we do to stay healthy? It would be having an apple a day to keep the doctor away, healthy fruits and vegetables, avoiding processed foods, which are, there's nothing inherently bad about sugar. I mean, sugar is the principal fuel that the body uses. If I didn't have a certain amount of glucose circulating in my bloodstream, I would fall over. So it's not a bad thing in and of itself. It's just that what glucose does is then to stimulate insulin secretion. Well, that's how the system works. And then you can, if you don't do things carefully, remember insulin also acts to increase fat storage. So having hyperinsulinemia, high insulin levels, is associated with increased body weight. If you flood your system with nutrients, with calories, and you have high insulin levels, you'll then become more obese. If you counterbalance that with foods that are absorbed more slowly, so the insulin levels don't spike, and you counterbalance it with physical activity so that you increase utilization of glucose and of fats, and you take the nutrients and use them to build healthy bodies. Then you'll kind of, if you want to say it, you'll use your marvelous organism, yourself, your human body, um, in the way that nature or evolution or whatever you want to call it intended. We are 95% plus or minus similar to every other mammal. Um, and we're highly similar to all vertebrates. And we're not all that dissimilar from any living creature on the planet. So insects have a form of insulin, which has a lot of different actions, but not many of the same, if you want to say, ancestral or evolutionary features of insulin action are present in every living creature that has insulin or insulin-like peptides. And the evolution of insulin and even more interesting, the evolution of the insulin receptor. So insulin you could think of as a key, and insulin, that key fits into receptors, which then activate many different biological processes. So going back to my youth as a math person, much of this is science, math, logical pathways. Um, the only dilemma is that it's so immensely complicated that it's awfully difficult to really put it together and understand it. But we're getting there. Allows us to take this immensely complicated thing and say, okay, what do we want to do to be healthy? And we simply want to use the system the way, it's sort of incorrect to say the way it's intended, because there is no intent in nature
Yeah.
or evolution. It's just, that's the way the cookie crumbles. It's to use our bodies in a healthy fashion is not so hard to it.
So
But
if somebody comes to you, one of your patients, and they are in an obese state and that they're feeling the effects of this insulin resistance, and I know everybody's different, so there's no like one size fits all solution to this, but what is the process like for somebody when they're trying to fix this or maybe reset their insulin?
so, so as a doctor, I have to take a look and say, okay, what is going on with this human being now? So if they're at a stage where their a normal blood sugar, a truly normal blood sugar, never goes over 100. And in fact, there's a study, um, maybe more than 20 years ago, where a group of doctors and researchers in Israel took a look at, and they, as part of their initial physical exam, they measured blood sugars, fasting blood sugars. So they had tens of thousands of people who had fasting blood sugars. And they said, well, let's not take the people where the blood sugars are in the diabetes range. Let's not take the people where the blood sugars are in the pre-diabetes range. 100 and up is considered pre-diabetes. Let's take people whose blood sugar is in the 90s. And let's simply say if the blood sugar was less than 90, 90 to 93, 93 to 96, 96, and so on,
Yep.
is there anything that you can find on those people who had lower but normal blood sugars versus higher but normal blood sugars? And the fact is that the people who had fasting blood sugars of 98, 99 were way more likely to the doctor. And the doctor says, oh, you're fine. We
Yeah.
better than just okay. And the lower, the better. And that is because of the blood sugar reflects insulin action, and glucose is constantly turning over, being produced in different organs in the body and being utilized by other organs in the body. And we want to get the balance so that it goes in the right direction. So if the person comes to me and, I saw someone yesterday who has had diabetes for many years, and she wasn't taking what I consider to be appropriate medicines. And she brought me a bunch of lab tests. One of them had a blood glucose of 170. And then the next one, more recently, had a blood sugar of 290. So and then we have an interesting test called hemoglobin A1C, which takes one of the most abundant proteins in the body, hemoglobin, the oxygen carrying protein in your red blood cells, and essentially takes a look at the percentage of hemoglobin molecules that have glucose attached to a certain spot on the hemoglobin molecule. And that's called hemoglobin A1C. So it's not perfect because some people could have blood sugar of 120 and their A1C could be 5.9, and some people it could be 6.9. And so there's variation in how much glucose attaches to hemoglobin for a given blood sugar level. But this woman's hemoglobin A1C started off 6 months ago as, I don't know, 8, and then the second one was 10. So she and her husband, very nice, intelligent people, were saying, well, what do we do? Somebody like that, I can't say you have to be on a healthy diet and exercise. Of course, I say that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the basis. But then I start to think about medicines. And the marvelous thing about treating diabetes today, as opposed to when I started, is that we have so much better treatment available. I mean, really, it's not just a little bit better or a quantitative change, but we almost have qualitative change in our ability to use medicines that are really able to help people to be healthier. So that's one extreme. But if someone comes to me and I have a lot of tools that I can use. I can put a continuous glucose monitor on someone with diabetes, and I can say, let's look at what your blood sugars are all through the day for a week or two. And I can see what's going on. And so if someone comes and they just have a fasting blood sugar, well, the fasting blood sugar could be 100 or 120, but after meals, it could spike to 250. Then the average blood sugar obviously would be higher. And in addition, those abrupt changes in blood sugar going up and down probably have their own adverse effects. Another person, the blood sugars are much flatter. And that's one of the things that we can accomplish by avoiding highly processed foods and by having regular physical activity, because the processed foods are simply absorbed more quickly. So the person who eats, let's say, Hershey's Kisses or Reese's Pieces or whatever,
All
is
fantastic. All taste great.
all the things that, the American food industry has gotten it, or breakfast cereal. One of my real things that I dislike about America, I love everything about America except the fact that we think that cereal is a healthy thing to start the day with.
I will say one of the biggest things I've learned myself from doing this podcast is I thought there were healthy cereals and unhealthy, and there's definitely a level, but realizing that if I have eggs with avocado and some ground beef and some blueberries, something like that, how much better my day starts off and how much like my energy levels stay consistent to start the day and I'm not as hungry an hour later. And I mean, obviously depends
So
on the workout and everything, but
for years, we kind of thought that Cheerios are very healthy foods because they have a
yeah,
little bit of fiber. But there's an easy way of understanding what Cheerios do to the brain, which is to give a toddler a bowl of Cheerios without milk, without sugar. Little kids love eating Cheerios
yeah,
because they are, immediately turned into sugar in the body, and that goes right to your brain. Not that sugar is bad for kids per se, but it's just got to be balanced. So I have cereal for breakfast often, but I try to have cereal with fruits and, yogurt and other things. And, sadly, the American breakfast is just a kind of unhealthy way to
muffins and bagels and a lot of starchy stuff.
starchy and fatty.
Yes.
But this morning I got up and lifted weights and I swam a mile. And so I felt that it wasn't so horrible that I had a bagel afterward.
And that, yeah, I don't want it to come across as like these foods are awful, you're terrible if you eat it, because that's not the case. There's so many ways to balance out the things that you
Right.
eat with your lifestyle and your activity levels and the amount of sleep that you get, the amount of water that you're drinking. I think there are just a lot of factors that go into it. So, can I ask you a little bit about the medicines? Because coming from my point of view, someone who's helped people with fitness and training and that piece of it, I see the GLP-1s and Ozempic and those come out as a way to lose weight. My immediate thought is, yes, there are circumstances where something like that is helpful to get somebody on the right path. But if that is what you're relying on, then you're not actually living a healthy lifestyle. You're losing a lot more muscle than actual fat. And it's something where once you stop, you haven't learned the good habits that you need to promote and live a healthy lifestyle. So is that are the GLP-1s, Ozempic, et cetera, like those helpful in some cases, but overall, do you think they're being overused by certain people? And I don't wanna put you on the spot or anything like that, but I
I'm happy for you to put me on the spot.
okay, you're on the spot then. What are your thoughts on these GLP-1?
The GLP-1 medicines first came into use by physicians about 15 years ago or so. And the initial drugs in this class were immediately used by doctors in the diabetes field because we found all sorts of amazing benefits. So the GLP-1s help your body produce insulin, but help you produce insulin in a fashion that's sensitive to the blood sugar. So when blood sugars go lower, GLP-1s don't push out insulin. When the blood sugars are higher, they do. That's pretty good because the older drugs that help people make insulin actually were kind of just an on-off switch. And if you took the drug, you would worsen these high insulin levels that cause adverse metabolic effects. Then the GLP-1s, instead of causing weight gain, which we saw with the insulin on-off medicines that just push levels up, or with insulin treatment, which is absolutely necessary for some people, but those are associated with weight gain. The GLP-1s were associated with weight loss. They were associated with improvements in blood fat levels. So the whole association of lipids, fat, and cholesterol with hardening of the arteries, that's a big part of what I worry about in taking care of people. And that's addressed by the GLP-1s. So the bottom line for me is not what is your number, what is your hemoglobin A1C, your blood sugar, your cholesterol. Bottom line is health. And the amazing thing that was realized with the GLP-1s right from the beginning of their use is that they are associated with reduction in heart attack and stroke. We never were able to say that before. So what an incredible finding that we have medicines for people with diabetes initially that led to reduced heart attack and stroke, the major causes of adverse outcome in diabetes and in people with obesity. Then the drugs became extended, starting with the less active medicines that were, so the drug Victoza or liraglutide, which was adapted to be an obesity medicine, but had to be injected every day and wasn't really that effective, but it was marketed as a medicine, Saxenda, and it really helped with weight loss in many people. And even in people who did not have diabetes, it was associated with, even though it increases insulin, it actually, the overall effect was to reduce insulin resistance and reduce the elevated levels of insulin in people who are treated with this. So I always look at it as lifestyle, diet, exercise, of course, not smoking, avoiding excess alcohol, all the other things that we include in lifestyle is not opposed to medicine. It's, I mean, I'm a professional pill pusher. I is to prescribe appropriate medicines to people with diabetes and with obesity and with high cholesterol and so on and so forth, and to help them to be healthy and not have cardiovascular events and all the other problems, kidney damage and so on. And so I don't see it as in any way contradictory for me to tell a person, here's a medicine that I want you to take for your obesity or for your diabetes or for your metabolic liver disease or for your heart failure or for your chronic kidney disease. And tentatively, my thought will be that you're going to take it as a long-term medicine because it's going to help you to stay healthy and reduce kidney damage, heart failure, all the things that I worry about so much in my patients. But at the same time, I want you to find a gym and take the fitness class. And I want you to exercise every day. You know, some people proudly tell me that they exercise at least 25 minutes a week or whatever. You know, it's so it has to be part of your daily life. And I want you to eat healthy. So I want you to have a healthy breakfast. So, you know, what you're describing with, you know, the eggs and, you know, not having processed foods and so on. By the way, egg white omelets, not the whole egg if you could avoid it.
Okay, okay. Sometimes I'll throw some egg whites in there as well.
So it's all the goal is for people to be healthy. The goal is for people to have long lives without illness. And so if taking a GLP allows you to do that in a healthy fashion, okay, great. And you know, I don't see there being any contradiction in taking medicines long term. If it's appropriate for your body, then that's a partnership with the healthy lifestyle. So it's not, okay, if you do things right, you'll get off medicine. No. If you do things right, you'll live longer and enjoy a healthier life. That's all that matters. And taking a medicine or not taking a medicine is just the mechanics of doing it. But eating healthy and exercising is not optional. That we agree on.
Now, is eventually the goal, and when you say long term, is that for, I mean, I know you can't put a number or a time on that, but I would think eventually, ideally, not having to take medicine to, being at a healthy lifestyle, a healthy weight, not having to take medicine would be better than having to take medicine. Is that a safe
Sure, but it
assumption?
doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So as we get older, things go wrong.
Mhm.
So we develop cholesterol deposits in our arteries. Our kidneys start working less well. We develop scar tissue and fat in our liver, let alone all the broken bones and arthritic joints that. So after all my years of exercising, I have less adequately functional ankles, knees,
Yeah.
and hips, and
I
shoulders and everything than they used to be. So we don't sadly, we don't actually have good medicines for arthritis of that sort, but keeping the body moving helps you to do it all in a healthy fashion, absolutely. But there's no real reason to move towards getting off medicines. If someone is totally healthy and doesn't need medicine, fine, don't take it. If you're dangerously overweight and develop diabetes and high cholesterol, and then you are able to lose that weight with a GLP-1 drug or not, and then you maintain being at the lower weight and you no longer need this cholesterol pill and this blood sugar pill and this blood pressure pill, great. But sadly, it doesn't happen that way. And so if you look at it's kind of unfair to people to say to them, if you just listen to me, you're going to wind up being healthier and you won't need medicine. That's not the goal. The goal is to take whatever medicine is appropriate, live the healthy lifestyle that's appropriate, and then have it help you. I'm just going to adjust my screen a little.
Yeah.
To help you to really exist in a healthier fashion. So I'm not. It's like the story of the person who gets a car and he, he drives it, has a great time, and then it stops working because it's run out of gas. And he goes back to the dealer and says, "I needed a new car. That this car doesn't work anymore." Well, if you need gas to drive the car or electricity, if you happen to have an EV,
Yeah.
that's what you need. The medicines are not bad guys. Medicines are simply there to help along with the rest of the pattern. It's technology working with intelligence, I would say, is what we're doing. And it makes sense. So I don't try to get people off medicines. I don't make a big effort to push unnecessary medicines. I certainly am not enthusiastic about using GLP-1s simply as a weight loss trick to look more beautiful, to look as wonderful as they want to look. But the reason to take a GLP-1 and all the other, and we have lots of other wonderful medicines that work on the kidneys, like the SGLT2 inhibitors, metformin, which is a basic medicine that has a lot of interesting effects and which we're finding to have a lot of benefit. So if taking a GLP-1 reduces heart attack and stroke, or if taking an SGLT2 reduces heart failure and kidney damage, or et cetera, then go for it. Have that be part of what you're doing to maintain your health, along with listening to Derek and
I don't know if we need that.
with you all the wonderful, healthy ways to live. And it's all one package.
Yeah.
That's how to look at it.
Well, thank you, Zach. I appreciate you taking the time to hop on with us. I know you don't get too many days off, so I don't want to steal all of your all of your New Year's Eve here, but I appreciate you taking the time and hopping on. Where can people find some of your articles you've written and get in touch with you if they have any questions or
So the Journal of Diabetes is the journal. I'm the editor of that journal, and it's indexed online, published by a large medical publisher called Wiley. And if you go online and you type in Journal of Diabetes, Zachary Bloomgarden articles, you'll find my monthly commentaries going back 15 years. And if you go and you type in Zachary Bloomgarden diabetes care, you'll find the articles that I've written in diabetes care. And if you want the whole ball of wax, you go to PubMed, which is this amazing website run by the NIH, I think, or by some governmental agency, assuming that they're still working, and just type in Bloomgarden diabetes, and you'll find a lot of articles by me. And then we have all these wonderful AI programs that now are able to help us find and interpret things. And then, you'll have questions. So that's what you should talk about with your doctor and with Derek and try to figure out what it means for you. So I think this has been fun to talk about all
yeah,
this.
thank you. I appreciate it. We've had a lot of conversations with other guests about insulin resistance and fasting and the benefits of a lot of different aspects on nutrition, but somebody in your position we have not had on yet. So I'm very thankful and grateful that you were able to take the time and to join us. So thank you.
It was my pleasure and my honor for you to invite me.
All right. Well, thank you.